Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin here with Teos Abadia
And
and also a special guest this week talking about not one but two things, and you're going to have to wait to find out what those two things are, is Alex Kammer. Hey, Alex, how is it going?
Oh, I'm great. Delighted to be hanging with you guys again.
and you're
We
coming at
are,
us from the game hole. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, thanks. I thought it'd be more atmospheric that way.
oh yeah, there's a lot of weight behind you, gaming history weight as well as physical tonnage.
Awesome.
So one of the reasons, Alex, that we have you on is because a week from when this show drops, Gamehole Con will officially be beginning. And I know you've been on the show before to talk about Gamehole Con as well as a project you've worked on. But let's dig in one more time and let's tell people out there who may be new to the show, new to the convention scene, what is Gamehole Con?
Sure, be happy to. Well, I guess the briefest and most succinct way to understand Gamehole Con is that it's a bad idea that's gotten out of control. So what that means is like a lot of things that are hatched around the gaming table where I'm presently sitting. This is exactly where the idea of Gamehole Con was hatched. And it was more of a, wouldn't it be funny if we did? Or boy, I think we probably could do that. Not like, hey, let's do a serious get together business plan project thing. It was more of a response of thinking about the fact that Gen Con had left Wisconsin to move to Indianapolis, which was a great move for them. But it was a bummer for us because, right down the road was Gen Con, and now it's a little more than just down the road. So we thought, man, Madison is such a cool gaming town. We still lead the world in per capita game stores. We have this wonderful university. We have the rich gaming tradition of Dungeons and Dragons literally being born just miles away from here. Let's give it a shot. And so we did. And, looking around the room at who we had around the table, we had some, capable people, professionals and people who know how to do things. And what we sought out to do was to set up and run the kind of show that we wanted to go to. So it means games that are, first of all, awesome and varied, that start on time, with GMs that show up on time. When you show up, your badges are ready. They have your correctly spelled name. You have a schedule. You have game tickets. Everything's clearly laid out. You know where to go next. You know where to find things, and so on. And that's the Swiss German in me, taking over with every detail has to be sorted out and perfect. And same with the other guys. And so what's happened is that 10 years ago, almost to the day, about 2 weeks from now, we had the first one and 400 some people showed up, and much to our surprise. And then since then, we've been growing at a 30 to 40% rate every year, barring only the COVID years. So now we have a show, you guys have seen it, and Shawn, you've been around for a little longer than Teos, but you've seen this thing grow, and you'll notice it again this year. We've had another big surge in growth, and our challenge is to not lose any of the awesome and experience that is Gamehole Con despite the growth. And growth is good. That means we can do more fun things. But we absolutely are not willing to lose any of the experience that has made our show so fun and personable, and the great energy around it. And so that's what the Gamehole has become. It's a show now that's probably going to be around over 6,000 attendees this year. So making us, we're the largest majority RPG convention in the world. Because we're majority RPG. There are bigger conventions, Gen Con, obviously, even Origins, but they have tons and tons of board games. Which actually makes a lot of sense because it's a much more efficient use of space than lots and lots and lots and lots of role-playing games. But that's what we do. That's what we love. And that's why we do it. And we've never cared about the bottom line. I mean, obviously, if this were a big commercial venture, we probably wouldn't have called it Gamehole Con, which is named after our game group because it was in my basement. And, so I wouldn't have to explain what is Gamehole Con, for the thousandth time, and like, where's that name come from? It sounds a little yucky. Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're just children fooling around in my basement. And so we thought it'd be funny, and it is, and it still is. And I think it's one of those names that people don't forget.
Yeah, that is true.
I think this will be my fifth or sixth or maybe even seventh year attending. And I still say, well, I have Gamehole Con coming up in October, and I'll just get this look from people. So I'll have to say it's named after the convention organizer's game room, which he calls the game. And I feel like I've told the story 1,000 times, being 5 steps removed from the actual story. But
thereby becoming our unwitting advocate.
Exactly. Always the teacher. I always have to explain.
And advocates we are, because you really do run a fantastic show, and kudos to you and to the team, because it is a great experience. It's one of those shows that's really easy when folks say, would I want to go to Gamehole Con? Do you recommend it? It's so easy to say, oh yeah, absolutely, because it has a nice feel of being all in one place. I wouldn't call it small, but it is small in that it's approachable. It's easy to get from one end to the other, easy to find, easy to get going. But it offers a lot and a big breadth of games. And I've loved being able to play a wide variety of games. And then seeing a lot of really cool people there too never hurts. But it's a wonderful con. So congrats on that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's both of you are very kind. And I appreciate your support has been, awesome throughout the years. So thank you. And we're just going to keep rolling. This is year 10. I can't believe it. I don't know how that, when you look at your kids, it's sort of the same kind of experience. Like, what? Wait a minute. Why are you leaving with a car now? What's going on? And so it's sort of the same thing. Gamehole Con now is so big relative to where we started that in large part, I've been rendered redundant once the show starts.
Congrats.
I don't really know how to do anything. I don't really know, so I get to go back to what I want to do, which is running games. So I get to run games during Gamehole Con, and I just hang out with you guys and do stuff like that. I don't, but the first few years, furiously passing out badges and all that kind of stuff. We have people who actually know how to do that a lot better than I do. So I just stay out of the way.
Awesome.
It really is. People have asked me, what's great about it. It really is sort of a distillation of all the great things that are about conventions, but in a manageable size. You have all the guests that you would find at a Gen Con, but accessible. You find all the games that you might want to run or play, but they're accessible. You can actually get in and find them, right? All the vendors that you might want are there without the dross of everything else going on around it. It's such a it's such a nice, closely knit feeling convention. Where you run into the people that or you run into fans, or you run into creators who are just all there mingling and enjoying this hobby we love. So, kudos to you, and it'll be interesting to see how it grows if you can keep that feel, right?
Yeah.
That's probably the challenge.
Yeah. Well, we absolutely are going to, because that's mission critical. I mean, this is not, no one is making a living doing this. That's, no one's going to retire and start to, it's just not going to, that's not the way this is going to go. So it's just vitally important to us that everyone has a great time, that the vendors do well, that the artists do well. And so there's a reason that we have a formula why our vendor hall grows in the pace it does. And that is so they do well. It matches it's in step with our attendance because we want everyone to want to come back. We want everyone to say they had a great time, and all of our return numbers data is extremely high. We're way higher than all the other shows, and I think that's a function of that. And that, not to try to sound like we're so clever or something like that. We just went out and asked, how do you do this? We spent a lot of time thinking about it, and then what do we want to do? What do we want to have, as an end product? And that's all, so we're just listened, talked amongst ourselves about the kind of things that we liked and what we'd want to experience when we went to a convention. And I've been going to the Gen Con since the mid 80s, and same with a lot of the other guys, and conventions all around the world. And I'm always loved to go out to other conventions and just absolutely shamelessly steal something that they do incredibly well that we don't do. It's like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. And absolutely. So I don't know if there are too many original thoughts, really, if you distill down Gamehole Con. I think it's just it's an amalgamation of a lot of good ideas from a lot of different people.
Right.
And as we've mentioned, Teos and I will be there. Teos, what are you doing at Gamehole?
What am I doing? I know that I'm in a podcast with you, Mastering Dungeons Live. That's pretty awesome. And then let's see, I am running the Clockwork Tower, an adventure that I wrote several times. I am doing a seminar, narrative design and tabletop games, and another one breaking into tabletop design. I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. And I will also be doing 4 different panels. One for Ghostfire Gaming called One World, Many Games, One Game, Many Worlds, talking about doing different sorts of games in the same setting. Mastering Dungeons Live, as Teos mentioned. I'm also doing one on tabletop role-playing game system design and world building for tabletop role-playing games. And I'm running an Aurora adventure along with Joe Rosso from Ghostfire Gaming called We All Fall Down. So if you backed Aurora, oh, thank you. And if you haven't, you'll get a taste of it if you come play this game. So, and Alex, you are also running games, correct?
That's right. I'm running. Well, let's see. One of them is a silly little thing that's going to be deeply disappointing to people. I can't believe people signed up for it. I don't know what's wrong with them. I even made so in the description say, "Don't sign up for this game. It's going to suck." But they're signing up for it anyway. It sold out immediately, which is I just don't understand what's going on with people. But I'm doing a spoof on the Keep on the Borderlands. It's called the Border Town Development Community. And what's happened is that the Keep on the Borderlands has experienced some gentrification and a building boom. And there's a condo development going on there. There's a shady real estate developer that's moved in and taken over the position of mayor of Border Town. And the Caves of Chaos are now a theme park called the Caves of Fun. Which your admission is free. If you do buy a condo, you have lifetime admission to the Caves of Fun, which is one of the selling points of the condo development. So it's just, I don't know, whatever. We'll see how that goes. Then my actual 2 games are then I'm running one of my favorite Alien scenarios. We may have talked about this before. I just adore the Free League games and the Year Zero engine. And Alien is just such an awesome con game. It's just so cinematic and so over the top, and everyone knows exactly what you say 3 words, they know exactly where they are and what everything looks like and what everything smells like. It's tremendous. It's so fun to run at cons. And then I'm running an excerpt from my new book, which is called The End of Everything. And that's going to be a one piece that kind of lends itself well to a 4-hour session, which is kind of hard to do out of a big campaign book. But there's one piece in particular that sort of works well for that. And I've run that a bunch of times, and that's gone over well. So those are my 3 games.
Awesome. And we will talk later about that new book. But first, we need to get to our listener corner, since we have so many people who have written in recently. We're going to take one question this week. We'll get to the other ones. We're collecting them. We will get to them. But this question from Vintage Zebra via YouTube was so keen that I figured that we really should talk about this, because it's important, especially in the context of us covering other types of games other than D&D on the show. So Vintage Zebra says, my main group has been playing 3rd edition for over 20 years. I'm ready for a big, big change. I've had the chance to play 5th edition on and off, but my turn to DM rolls around again, and I plan to survey several different games that use different mechanics and emphasize different aspects of role-playing. For instance, I'm very interested in running the Star Trek game or a game of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Do you have any advice on how to introduce a group to a new game? The mechanics are important, of course, but also how to teach a group about the kind of stories a game is built to create and the ways a player is supposed to interact with that world. And this is just an incredibly cogent question, because that, more than anything, is the problem with running a different game for a group that is used to one game. And we've probably all run into this as game masters if we've run a group through one system over and over and over again. After running AD&D, I tried Top Secret and Paranoia and Torg and Dungeon World later and Gamma World, and I didn't prep the players correctly. So they ended up playing Top Secret and Paranoia and Torg and Dungeon World and Gamma World exactly like D&D. So the question now is, how do you do that? How do you get them ready? I've opened the floor to this.
I'll jump in on
here.
mechanics and leave the juicier bits to you guys. But I like, whenever I run a game that you're trying to teach how it works, I will try to create scenarios. The first scenarios that we're going to experience, we'll do things one at a time, so that you have a chance to register and kind of log that and learn that. So the D&D equivalent would be you start in a situation where you're going to make skill checks. So you look at that part of the character sheet, you figure out those roles, you have a couple of them, right? There's no pressure, it's all very relaxed, and we get that down. Great. Roll D20s, you want it to be big, you're adding this modifier over here. And then we go to the next encounter, and it might be a very simple thing like a trap firing at you, and you've got to either disable it or break it or something like that. And it's a very simple 1-2 little interaction that's a little bit combat-ish, and we get there. And then we can go into a combat that's simple, short, not high stakes or anything like that. And that lets us learn the combat mechanics. And from there, we can go wherever we want because we've got the basics of the game down mechanically. And I would do that as well for whatever other game system I'm running, where I'll break down a couple of components of the game one by one, nice and intro, and then you can go from there.
Any thoughts, Alex?
Yeah, it's quite a subject. I guess first off, it's have to have some buy-in from the whole group. And it's kind of an interesting sub-subject of that's kind of kicking around recently about, we've been talking about player agency for forever, or at least for the last couple of years, but also DM or GM agency. And that is, hey, players, help your DM or GM out. If they would like to, they're presenting a story to you, just give it a try, even though you may not like Savage. What? I'm not sure if I want to play that. Just try it. Just give it a try first from the outset. And then I think the GM in that new game system, when we try something new here in the Gamehole, I try to first of all send out a primer that everyone can look at. Mm-hmm. And then, the importance of a session zero that is important in any game is just doubly so and that's exactly what Teos you're describing, is to get together and really kind of splash around the mechanics a little bit first, just to get everyone comfortable. And then, your listener who posed the question suggested several properties that, like Alien, have trigger things with people that we learn. We know what that is. We know what that world looks like. That's helpful, I think, if you're going to get a group to play a different game, to mess around with an IP that they might be familiar with already is a real good place to start. And then I think finally is to really be frank and understand how the difference of this new game is mechanically at its heart than Dungeons and Dragons. If you're a D&D dedicated D&D group, as the Gamehole was for 20 plus years before we even thought of trying some of the game, that accepting the fact that D&D is a superhero game in its chassis, and that something like Call of Cthulhu is absolutely not. And that's a real important distance. So, hey, players, you got to just, as a threshold matter, you got to appreciate this axiomatic fact. And then once that's, then I think you have a better chance, because then, you can't obviously play Call of Cthulhu like D&D. And a lot of those games just won't work. So I don't know, for better or worse, that's my rambling thoughts on the subject.
No, that covers pretty much everything that I was going to say. The only couple of things that are sort of tied to that, but maybe I'll take it a step further, is if you're going to play a game of Star Trek, sit down and watch an episode of Star Trek and say, this is the game we're going to play. So everyone is on the same page, because to Star Trek for me is like the original series in the Next Generation. Star Trek for somebody else may be Brave New World. Star Trek for somebody else may be the new movie series that's out. And each of those are different things. And a game, a story that are set in those different series are going to be different from each other. So sit down and say, all right, this is the kind of story we're going to tell with the game that we're about to play. Then you can get into the mechanics. And it was funny because when Teos was saying how you would do it for D&D is sort of I call it a microtransactional game, in the sense that there are these little tiny discrete things that you do, and they don't necessarily mean a lot in the holistic story that's going on. But all right, let's all make perception checks. Mm-hmm. What does the perception check mean? Probably not a heck of a lot. Then there are games where everything is writ larger, where every check that you make is actually a big macro transaction that means a lot more. So getting players to understand that potential difference in games, right? In Star Trek, as we talked about with the 2D20 system, you may make checks that have a 0 difficulty because you're just trying to build up momentum. And that momentum is a big part of the story, where your expertise and your goals are a big part of the game. And so getting people to understand that is important, is more important than maybe those step-by-step things that are important in D&D.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I started with mechanics because at some point you want the players to feel like they understand what they can do and how they do it, so that everything else is easier on top of it. But like, as you both said, it's really important to have those conversations of what the larger thing is. So, like, I'm preparing to run Blade Runner by the same Free League system, right? And one of the concepts of Blade Runner is that there's a lot of kind of introspection where each player is thinking through, how human am I? How do I deal with the oppressive nature of the world? And what am I doing to either try to exert my force upon it or to give into it? That's part of the big question, right? And how am I going to handle big things that are going to happen, big theme things, right? Like what it means to have rights, right? And so you want to help your players understand that, hey, this game that we're going to play is about this, right? So you want to get pages of the book that maybe talk about it, or you want to provide a scene maybe that's a preview scene that's kind of like almost a prequel movie that they're going to see, to get them into that mood of the concept and help them around that. And it can be hard, right? Like you might play Aliens and someone thinks like, well, yeah, I want to be like the indestructible whatever. Well, great, as long as you're ready for the really hard downfall at the end, because indestructible character doesn't really go hand in hand with Alien, right? This is a tale of horror and probably at the end demise. So you want to be in that headspace and help players get to that headspace around the concept and what it is. What are the themes of this game that matter, that we want to all play with?
Yeah, that all makes total sense to me, and also mechanically, for just taking Blade Runner, for example, and compare it to 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, checks are much less frequent, where it's interesting when I play a game of Alien, people want to say, hey, I want to make a perception check. What's the equivalent? So, no, what are you trying to see? You see it, it just is, so that's some games are just very different that way, in terms of that's also an interesting thing I've always noticed when I play a non-D&D game at a con. That's another that I always have to these are skill checks, and a lot of these games are big moments. It's not anything trivial. We're not gonna. You just know it. You can see it. You can do it. You know how to do this. You're an engineer or a soldier or whatever. You know how to do all that stuff. So yeah, it's fascinating. And you know what? Good for D&D. Good for D&D. What a great problem to have, though, is like we have to say, here's D&D. This is slightly different. You just have to think about it in different terms. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. So Vintage Zebra, thank you for that astute, excellent question. And we look forward to answering more questions next time. But for now, let's get into our news and commentary section. And the big drop this week was the next playtest packet number 8, which had the Bastion system and cantrips. And Teos, I know you had a lot to say about this Bastion system, and you said it via YouTube already. So what did you talk about on?
Yeah, I only took an hour to talk about it, so it's not like it. I mean, honestly, it was one of those things I was like, I'm not going to make this video. And then I just kept on rattling them around in my brain, because what's fascinating about the Bastion system is that it does not leverage kind of anything else that's in the game in 5e, other than it gives you some gold rewards, and it gives you some rewards that are very much D&D things, right? It'll give you advantage on a check or things like that. It might bring you back to life. But it's kind of really surprising to me that this is a 21-page system. If you think of that, without any art, it's 21 pages. So it's an amazing long system. And the basic of it is, at 5th level, you can get a Bastion. Your Bastion is going to take turns, and the expectation is 6 to 7 times a level, where each one is a week. And on those turns, you are either in the Bastion and giving a specific order, or you have to go with the general option, which is called maintain mode. And the Bastion will generate points. If it's a maintain mode, that's all it does. If you're giving it specific orders, then it depends on what facilities you're using that get activated to generate points. And if that already sounds like, wow, that sounds like a lot, well, there's even more to it, right? There are basic facilities, and it's sort of funny. There's some funny things like choose two of a kitchen, a washroom, a bedroom. Except there are actually more. It's like, well, do I want a toilet in my room in my castle? And then there are these special facilities that give you a variety of benefits, and they are tiered. So it gets complicated in terms of like, it's not as simple as, hey, I want to DM, I want to run a tavern. Well, the tavern is a level 13 structure, so no, you can't. You know, it's a little weird in that sense. And I overall, you know, I came at the end of the video and I said, well, it's not a system that I would use in its current incarnation. And I wish that it did. It made a little more mathematical sense. I wish that instead of generating gold, it used gold. And I wish that it tied into the larger rules that already exist in the game, like downtime, which it doesn't. It doesn't leverage that at all. It doesn't use hirelings. It, in fact, abstracts these things away and maybe even undermines them. So it'll say, you can just get a magic item. So why would we bother using the old downtime rules for it, right? Or the system it just runs a place, so you don't have to run the rules for running a business anymore. And so, yeah, I didn't love it.
Yeah, it was interesting. Well, first of all, in case this didn't get translated well, the Bastion system is basically talking about characters having their own strongholds.
Yeah.
So if you go all the way back to AD&D days, where at certain levels you could get a keep, you could get a wizard's tower, you could get these things, and what that meant was really, yes, Teos is holding up some of the old books. And there are actually other systems that have been built for 5e that do this, right? There is the, of course,
MCDM.
in Acquisitions Incorporated, we had franchises. MCDM has had a couple different books. Did you know that for Oracle of War, we created a salvage base system?
Yes.
And if you look at that salvage base system, you may see some similarities. I'm not saying in any way that was taken from that, but if you design long enough, you will start to see similarities between things that have been done and things that will be done in the future, because there are only certain paths you can take when you design something.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at it along those lines of, how is it usable with what's come before? And as you say, Teos, we already had downtime days, but this doesn't even touch downtime, which is interesting. So the question then becomes, will downtime remain a thing for the 2024 version? Will it be use downtime or use this, or use both as you wish? It's an interesting concept. Alex, did you get a chance to look at this?
I haven't, and I saw that it popped up, and I thought, D&D's never been really great for stronghold rules, quite frankly, and I because it's usually just appended on to a different game. You know, it's just not designed for that. I think the games that do a better job with strongholds, building, are more that have a express resource management component to the game. Then it works better. You know, there's an economy already in place of mechanically and actual economy. The one that I can think of that I like for that is Forbidden Lands does a really great job. But this is a game where you have to check your resources every day for food and water. So and because of that, your ability to be an artisan, then so on, makes more sense, and it works in the game. Doesn't feel like an add-on. So, I think we screw around with stuff like that when we were kids. Of course we did. We all had castles and all that kind of stuff, and it's absurd. And, but I don't know. I'm not sure that that's going to be a big mover for those guys and trying to sell the new rules. But that's just me.
That's a great observation, Alex, because it occurred to me that this may have been their weapon mastery for the DMG book, right? That they were hoping folks would go, ooh, this is like super exciting. The way that they got an overall very positive, strong reaction to weapon mastery. And I don't know if they're going to get that from this for those reasons that we've mentioned. One of the things that I said, when I look at this stronghold system in Bastion, can I run it with most 5e adventures? And the answer isn't yes. It's no, which is a shame, right? Because what is the point of a system that I can't fit into most campaigns? Then why is it in the DMG, right? Whereas and you might say, well, it's just hard to, but the patron system fits into most adventures, right? Downtime fits into most adventures. Like a lot of these systems that 5e has added do work, and a stronghold system could work. The franchise system works while adventuring. You can see that in the Ack Inc. adventure, right? Like we could have a system that would be more useful to more DMs and more games. And so I think that if you're going to put something in the core book, it really should work that way.
Yeah. When I looked at it, I said, okay, this is just a play test. And they're just trying to see if people want a system like this. So they built the system and they presented it as imperfect as it is, just to sort of get a general feel for, okay, yeah, this is cool. So I sort of skimmed it and read some parts and was like, okay, yeah, that works. Oh, that might not. And then I saw that, as you mentioned, Teos, you take Bastion turn 6 or 7 times each level, and each one lasts a week. And I was like, wait a second. I've been waiting for D&D to tell me how to handle leveling, right? How many encounters should you have before you level? How long should that be? How many encounters should you take before a long rest? And D&D has, in this edition, never told me. But this sort of does, right? This sort of says, every level you should Bastion turn 6 or 7 times. So that's 6 or 7 weeks. Okay, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to think, okay, how many encounters should I be right? I'm now trying to build that system that I've been waiting for using this, and I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. But it's at least an interesting concept to start to think through.
I hope it really is in its early stages, like you're talking about. I worry that, the calendar says November or October. Getting ahead of myself. Like the calendar says October, and I worry that they'll rush things through. But the video where Crawford talks about it does maybe suggest that they have other concepts than just the granular rules. So he talks at the sort of higher level, and he suggests, hey, you could easily run this with the Planescape adventure. And I'm thinking, I don't think you can. But at least that's the goal. Like, I'm happy to hear that's the goal, because I think that should be the goal. And so maybe they'll tweak it to have a different way that it applies. But I worry that it's answering the wrong questions overall as a system.
Right. I could see campaigns that they build use this, and I would rather see that. Right. The third adventure they put out with these new rules is all about protecting your homeland. Yeah. And so this Bastion system becomes important. Then you can start pulling in stuff from other games. Well, it's not universal, but we've said before on this show, not every system is going to work. But if you put in a system that works for this adventure, then you're teaching DMs how to use that system, and then they can port it into their home games correctly. And so that's why I'd rather see this as part of something else that DMs could say, oh, cool, it worked well in this game, but I can see how it wouldn't work in the next campaign I'm running. But if I build my own campaign, I could use it there.
John, did you happen to look at the other part of this, the end of this document? There are these cantrip enhancements. Did you take a look at those?
I did, and I was actually the ones I skimmed. I was happy. Yeah, I feel like they fixed some cantrips.
They are good. I mean, I worry a little bit that they're good enough that you get more of the I'll just use my cantrip every turn, because that's a perfectly serviceable option, right? It's more of the Eldritch Blast type approach. I'll just do this always. Toll the Dead, right, is kind of in that category where unless I need something else, I might as well just Toll the Dead. And a lot of these are stronger to the point where I'm curious whether that will hurt play at all, but probably not. Probably this is all good to fix these.
No, I'm of the school that I don't mind that. If a player wants to do that and that they're happy doing that, I'm totally fine. Instead of taking a 20-minute turn, summoning 12 things and rolling attacks for each of them, to just cast this spell because it works. But kudos to them, to the folks at Wizards, for actually recognizing the fact that something like True Strike was never used, or Spare the Dying was basically just a medicine check that you didn't have to roll. Now you can at least do it from a distance, and that gives you something other than just I have to walk up to it and then cast the spell.
Yeah.
Why bother? So
Blade
yeah,
Ward,
you know,
any of that. Yeah.
good. Yeah, I'm at least happy for that. All right. Well, Alex, unless you have anything to add there, we will continue to the next bit of news, which I do believe pertains particularly to you.
Sounds good.
All right. So Alex and Alan Patrick have a new book out called The End of Everything. And rather than me try to fumble my way through a description, I'm going to let Alex tell you what it's about.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, my buddy Alan and I have been working on this book. We hatched this plan back in Teos. You were there. It was in Winter Fantasy 2020. I remember running into you there. But we were back then starting to talk. Yeah, we were starting to talk about we should write a book together. Hey, I've been given a publisher wants me to write a book, a big adventure book in this certain section of their proprietary setting called the Lost Lands. What do you think? And so we started kicking around, and we both very quickly gravitated toward, some of our personal interests, which are cosmic horror. And so, in brief, Alan and I are attempting to bring in elements of the Cthulhu mythos into Dungeons and Dragons, while still keeping the game Dungeons and Dragons. This tails with what we talked about earlier in different games, and I think I explicitly mentioned this, that a game Call of Cthulhu is fundamentally different from Dungeons and Dragons. This is still Dungeons and Dragons. There are some new mechanics that we hatched to hopefully impart, especially a building sense of doom as you ineluctably face the end of everything. That you, as you adventure across this huge part of the world, and things start getting worse and worse, we have what's called a corruption value, and that's not a unique idea. The concept of corruption is used in a lot of games, but unlike in sanity or madness, this is a number that tracks your physical and spiritual toll while being in this region, being exposed to the miasmic pestilential forces that are coming from somewhere. But those things don't prevent you from being a bard or a ranger or a paladin or whatever. They have some short-term consequences, and over time, it starts with a number and you decline. But that declination doesn't have anything to do with you mechanically as you play the game. It has tremendous consequences at the end. And which I thought was kind of fun is that it has not just negative consequences. It's a weal or woe kind of idea, that you can be so corrupted that it's possible that certain real terrible creatures don't even recognize you as an enemy because you are so corrupted. And that has some very big advantages. So that's what the book is at its heart. That's what mechanically it is. It's also a big investigation because while it might be that a glass will suddenly slide off the table and shatter, or some shutters will bang, or the dead are starting to rise. Wait, is the season's actually going in reverse now, or crops are failing? This stuff builds and builds and builds as you go forward. You have to figure out why the hell that's happening, and it's not obvious. It's not obvious at all. It takes quite a research adventure to figure that all out. Going to exotic locations and experiencing all kinds of horrid things. As your characters, continue to experience this corruptive force that affects every living thing in this region. And if the characters are not stalwart enough to get to the end and put a stop to a being of mythos capacity and fame, that's it. That's the end of everything. This plane will cease to exist. So there are very real stakes in this one, and Al and I had a lot of fun doing it. It's just so cool. We got to lean into all that, and wonderful. That's why it's taken years. We've really play tested it hard. I've never personally play tested anything nearly as hard and as expensively as we did, because we wanted to make sure that we kept D&D, and it feels like D&D, but that the players were actually tense and they were, had some element of cosmic horror without being, like gothic horror, jump horror, any of that kind of stuff. It's not, super gross or anything like that. It's more, psychologically interesting, I think. So anyway, that's in brief what we're trying to do.
I've only skimmed it, but I was struck by the beginning of looking through how events play out, that it feels much as it would in a novel or TV show, where in the early stages you're seeing these signs of things going wrong, but there isn't an immediate, clear, as you said, answer as to why, but there are rather these breadcrumbs and indications of things going in the wrong way. It felt very cinematic to me, which I appreciated.
I appreciate that. You guys are veteran adventure designers. You know how challenging it is to write an adventure that will allow exploration in any number of directions while having a central narrative. You know, that's one of the more difficult things I hope we've captured here. I'm not sure. I think we have, maybe. But it's extremely hard to do. And so that's what, that's why it's not, hey, you get the hiring NPC tells you to go, and that's it, and that's you're not on a quest to find the thing. It's much more obscure and weird than that.
Dig the layout, the art.
And when will this be available? Oh yeah.
Thank you. So, I mean, you guys saw a very 98% rough draft. This week this should be done. So one of the things I did here, the deal was with this publisher, it's Frog God Games. I said, hey, if I'm going to do it, the deal is we have to have a completed book before we start the Kickstarter. So as soon as a Kickstarter fulfills, bam, everyone gets their book. I, like everyone else, have all kinds of Kickstarters out there that are, who knows where from fulfillment. I just didn't want to be associated with one of those in any way, shape, or form. Not that Frog God they've always delivered on other things, and I'm sure they would. But instead of backing a concept or an idea, back this book. Here it is. It's done, and you'll get it immediately. In fact, what we're doing, they've allowed me to do some other things that are cool. Like we get to, and during the Kickstarter itself, which will start during Gamehole Con, I think almost certainly probably the Thursday of Gamehole Con, which is October 19. That's when the thing should launch. You can get a collector's version, which has a second cover, an alternate cover of, it might, in fact, will feature the terrible being that is behind all this. And in between those two books in a slipcase is a GM screen. And that's the only way you can get the GM screen, which is actually going to be a very useful GM screen. Because if you guys looked at the book, even flipping through, you'll see there's lots of tables, lots of things happening, magical mishaps, corruption, all kinds of stuff that I would have loved to have a 4-panel GM screen as I did all that playtesting. Same with Alan and everyone else. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. So October 19, it should be launched by then. It's going to go into distribution as well. We have a bunch of orders from various distributors to buy the book. So it'll show up in game stores. That'll probably be in early 24, I would imagine, given the print lag. I'm not exactly sure, but the PDFs will go out to everyone in mid-November.
Yeah, and I should make we should make it clear that this is really a campaign, right? This is more than 200 pages. There are monsters and magic items. It's a full-fledged, really nicely playing out campaign. I particularly like the beginning of it. Does a really nice job of telling the DM what's coming up and what to expect from the adventure. And yeah, looks great.
Appreciate that. Yeah, there's some cool things like, Noel is a playable race here, because that's part of the history of this region. It's just such a forlorn and terrible place that they've faced so many common awful things that the Knolls came when the call went out, and they said, yeah, we'll stand with you, everyone else. And so that you can play a Knoll character. And we have backgrounds and different character choices and tons of monsters, and it's for a 5-player group. I think it's levels 1 through 12. If it's 4, it's probably a little slightly higher than that, probably 13 or 14. Same problem you talked about earlier, Shawn, with milestones, and we try to do our best we can with that. We should be around here. And you as experienced DMs, when you see it, yeah, that's the right level. But we played it hard. It should be 1 through 12. I think I was real confident with that. I thought at first when I wrote it, it's gonna be 1 through 14, but then after we played it through, the higher level characters, that stuff was not really well play tested, never really was. And so it's amazing what a 12th level 4 12th level characters can do. So you can definitely survive it. It's definitely survivable at that point.
And I'd say Alan Patrick is one of the people I trust to create great high level experiences. He's on my short list of people that I go, it's high level, but by Alan, okay,
yeah. He was great to work with. He had so many. Yes, yeah. The end of everything is called, and yeah, much props to Alan for a lot of the weirder ideas that came into the book.
Right.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that. And last but not least, in our news this week, we have D&D ending its Penguin Random House distribution chain. Teos, why don't you lead us through this last bit of news here?
Sure. D&D has always used a whole number of distributors to push books out from their warehouses to all the different places. So they don't mail it to your local gaming store. It goes through a distribution network. And those distributors handle sort of different responsibilities. And they sometimes, often they overlap. There'll be multiple that cover a particular vehicle. But Penguin Random House announced that they are no longer involved, and Wizards quickly announced that as well. And that's a big deal because they are a major distributor, and they are particularly good at getting to places like Target and Barnes and Noble. They also had been doing a lot of carrying of the books that we may not think of in everyday life. So things like the novel that's about the movie or the kids' books, things like that. So apparently the kids' books are going to continue to be through Random House. So those sort of licensed D&D titles will continue. But the hardback books will no longer be through Random House. And the reason is, it took a while to get to this, but the news finally broke that Hasbro has direct links to stores like Target and Barnes and Noble. So they will now move all that through Hasbro itself. So Wizards gets to pay Hasbro, and Hasbro gets to overall not have paid anything for the movement of those books through the distribution network. Everybody's saying this probably won't have any big impacts for either 2024 or anything else. But still, there are always those chances that things could be now being done slightly differently, and it could have impacts in terms of the growth to certain areas. And there was a sort of fun quote, Shawn. I don't know if you saw the comicbook.com article.
Yeah, it said, when news of the distribution agreement first broke, some older Dungeons and Dragons fans recalled the previous breakup between the original D&D publisher TSR and Random House. But this is vastly different circumstances, but it's often pointed as one of the major incidents leading to TSR's bankruptcy. So yes, that is true. What I laughed about was this news broke months ago, but nobody cared. And then somebody found it somewhere, and so they brought it up. And the initial reaction for D&D or WotC haters was, "Oh, look what they're doing! They're destroying the publishing industry as we know it." And then people were like, "No," because they're distributing through different people. Well, think of the game stores. Well, it doesn't really affect the game stores because they have a different distributor. Well, and I just thought, what would have happened if they had said, WotC signs a deal with Random House to distribute books? It would have been the same, right? We still would have gotten this outpouring of rage from a certain faction of fans who just have to rage about something WotC related. So it was sort of funny. I chuckled as I saw all of the speculation, which was debunked step by step along the way, until we get to the point where it's like, it probably doesn't affect much. It might not. We don't know.
Oh, this is what I understand. That this was in the works for a long time, and the roots of it, the reason why the Random House piece was held onto for so long, is that they handled the e-reader component of this, and obviously with what Wizards going in, into acquiring D&D Beyond, that spelled the end of that relationship eventually.
Interesting.
That does make sense.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really hard for fans these days to understand is the scale at which D&D operates, and that the things that we may have a real connection to, like our gaming store, is not the most important part of how D&D works or sells, right? Or that we might think about whether there's a glut of options being released in 2023 may feel very important to us, but may not affect the market at all. And part of the discussion on the blog series that I've been doing with D&D's numbers, I see a lot of folks who they'll see it through their particular lens. And unfortunately, the D&D business is so large that it increasingly has nothing to do with the lens that we see it through as the type of gamer we happen to be.
Mm-hmm. Can't argue with that. We will, of course, keep an eye not only on distribution and on sales, as Teos has been doing, but on every other business aspect of the hobby that comes across our desk.